Hola mis amigos y bienvenidos a una lección breve sobre el pretérito y el imperfecto. It really is an exciting time as you've already learned the endings for the pretérito and you've recently learned the endings for the imperfecto. Now we can really start to dig into when you need to use pretérito and when you need to use imperfecto. This is a big grammatical issue in Spanish, mostly because we don't have these two different tenses in English. So if you're a native speaker of English, it's not really a concept you've thought about before. So the purpose of this presentation is to get you oriented to cómo y cuándo, how to make pretérito in imperfecto, which is review, and really start focusing on cuándo, when to use each one. Pues, vamos a empezar. Bien, quick review. Do you remember the pretérito endings? We really need to know these at this point. Your basic regular endings for AR verbs in the pretérito are con acento, aste, o con acento, amos, astes, adon. If you've never thought of it this way before, think about saying them twice if they get an accent mark. So, aste, o amos, adon. I tend to skip astes because it's optional in my courses to learn the vosotros endings. So that leaves you with aste, o amos, adon. It's kind of catchy, verdad? Aste, o amos, adon. And we can do something similar with the ER and IR endings in the pretérito. Iste, io, imos, yeron. Ready to speed that up a bit? Iste, io, imos, yeron. Iste, io, imos, yeron. Almost sounds like a dying pig, verdad? But it can really help you to use those rhythms to remember your pretérito endings. And of course, just a side note here, también hay muchos irregulares. There are quite a few irregulares in the pretérito that we've already been bringing in, and it's always a good idea to be constantly reviewing those, recycling that information because they don't disappear. Bien. How about our imperfecto endings? Those are more recent for you. Your AR imperfecto endings are ava, avas, ava, avamos, con acento, avaisavan. And your ER and IR imperfecto endings are ia, ias, ia, iamos, iasian. All with acentos. And don't forget about the three irregulares in el imperfecto, ser, id, and ver. So make sure you're keeping those in mind too. Muy bien. Pues, that's all review. Let's move on to something new and exciting. Bien. More specifically about the pretérito. The pretérito is used to express specific completed actions. And I like to use the abbreviation SCA when I talk about specific completed actions. The pretérito is used for actions or events completed in the past, or actions completed at a specific point in time, like Juana fue al centro. Juana went downtown. Los estudiantes vinieron a clase. The students came to class. Both of those events are completed in the past and done. The pretérito also expresses action that interrupted something that was ongoing. Por ejemplo, yo hacía mi tarea, hacía es imperfecto, yo hacía mi tarea cuando Juan me llamó. Something was ongoing, something was happening. I was doing my homework when boom, Juan called me. And that interruption is in pretérito. You can kind of diagram this too. Yo hacía mi tarea, the wavy line is imperfecto, cuando Juan me llamó. Boom. Interrupted action is pretérito. That wavy line is imperfecto, and the X and the specific time marker dot here are pretérito. Another example of that. Elisa conducía, she was driving cuando tuvo un problema con el coche. Boom. Tuvo is pretérito. It interrupted the ongoing action. Lots of examples of that are really prevalent, and I hope you'll notice them. Bien. So then what does the imperfecto express? Well, here's a great little cheat, if you will. Ha ha ha. Here's a great little acronym that you can use to remember imperfecto with the word cheated. Think of it this way. When you use the imperfecto, you're like a country singer. You feel cheated. And you can memorize all these justifications for using imperfecto. The first is continuous action. Continuous action is really the most basic use of imperfecto, and it's that basic translation you've already learned. Was or were plus ing or used to, as in, yo jugaba afuera cuando era niña. I used to play outside when I used to be a little girl. Continuous action. The H of cheated is habitual action. Habitual means anything that happened more than once, as in, íbamos a la playa cada verano. We went to the beach every summer. It's a repeated habitual thing. I could even use my diagram again for that. Íbamos a la playa cada verano. It's repeated ongoing action. The first E in cheated is for endless action. And this is an important one when you're telling a story. It's for setting the scene. When you start out a story and say something like, hacía sol, it was sunny. Era una noche triste, it was a sad night. When you set the scene of a story, you use imperfecto. A, age. When you talk about age in the past, you always use imperfecto. That's just a straight up rule. Don't think about it, just do it. Cuando yo tenía 4 años, when I had 4 years. In other words, when I was 4 years old. Always use imperfecto when you talk about age in the past. Similarly, time on a clock. When you talk about time in the past, you use imperfecto. Eran las 6 cuando, it was 6 o'clock when. The presente form of that would be son las 6. It is 6 o'clock. But in the past, we say it was 6 o'clock. Eran las 6, using imperfecto. The second E in cheated is for emotions and mental states like estaba triste o preocupada, esperaba ir, I was sad or worried, I was hoping to go. Emotions are ongoing, so they tend to be in the imperfecto. And finally, the D of cheated is a big one, really important for descriptions. When you describe things in the past, you use imperfecto, as in, Paco era alto, la casa era grande. And looking back at all of these examples, when you contrast them with pretérito, think about it this way. These aren't things that are specific completed actions. They're more wavy, they're repeated, they're ongoing. They didn't happen in a specific period of time. Therefore, we use a different past tense with them. We use the imperfecto. Bien. There are clue words that can guide you toward each tense, and you can treat these as vocabulary, keeping in mind that they're associated with a particular tense usually. So for pretérito, we tend to see guide words like ayer, la semana pasada, o el mes pasado, hace un año, un día, de repente, fue cuando, entonces, luego, después. These words in particular are great for telling about a series of actions. Once you get a story going, then you can use these words to create some flow in your story and to express a series of events. Suddenly, a shadow appeared on the wall. Then I got out my flashlight. Later, I heard a scream. Afterward, who knows what happened afterward, but a series of actions like that, all these words are indicators for pretérito. Similarly, we have some guide words for imperfecto, and these are not pointing us towards specific completed actions. They're more about ongoing, habitual, non-definite things like muchas veces, cada día, todos los lunes, frecuentemente, raramente, usualmente, de vez en cuando, a veces, mientras. Notice that all of these terms refer to things that were happening more than once, that were ongoing, and therefore they're consistent with imperfecto. Bien, so let's start in with a little practice. Take a look at this cuento. For each of the underlined verbs, I'd like you to be able to explain the reason for using the underlined tense. I've done all the work here. You don't have to conjugate or come up with anything except for the justification of why I used pretérito or imperfecto. I'll read the story to you, and then you should push pause while you think about the justifications, and then you can check your answers next. Hacía una noche fría y estaba muy oscura. Eran las 3 de la mañana. Llovía y hacía mucho viento. De repente apareció un hombre en mi puerta. Yo grité y rápidamente busqué mi teléfono. El hombre vino hacia mí con un cuchillo en la mano. Ay, ay, ay. Are you scared yet? Bien. Kind of a scary scene, ¿verdad? Bien. Push pause and write down a justification for each tense that was underlined. Bien. And here we have some respuestas y explicaciones. When we started out, we were setting the scene. We were describing the scene of the story. That's why hacía and estaba were in imperfecto for setting the scene, description. Eran, which was in the imperfecto, was expressing time on a clock, and time on a clock is always imperfecto. It's the T in cheated. Llovía and hacía were in the imperfecto. They were also setting the scene and describing. In that description, they were telling what was happening. Was or were plus ing is imperfecto. Apareció is pretérito. It's an SCA, a specific completed action. Boom, all of a sudden it happened. And then we got into a series of events. Grité, busqué, vino. All those three were in the pretérito, and they're all specific completed actions. A series of events that are over and done. Bien, so that's a first little practice and warm-up for you with pretérito and the imperfecto. And keep in mind, amigos, this is a skill that grows over time. You don't just master pretérito and imperfecto one day and check it off of your list. It's something that continues to develop over a long period. So keep that in mind and be patient with yourself. Also remembering that the more you practice this, the more you'll see that the same types of examples show up over and over. And then you can start to think back and say, oh, I've seen something like this one before, and it was imperfecto, so this one must be imperfecto also. Communication is really 80% repetition. So after a while, you just start to see the same patterns over and over again. Bien, having said that, how about a little more práctica, clase? Try these 6. Slowly read each example before you endeavor to answer, and this time you are going to do the conjugating of the verbs. So feel free to look back at your notes or look back in the presentation thinking about what points to pretérito and what points to imperfecto, ¿vale? Buena suerte. And here you have some answers for those 6. Número 1, era. Era is imperfecto, and the reason is description. And it's also just a common expression. When you talk about being young or being a child, you use era imperfecto, cuando era niña, etc. Número 2, iba, also imperfecto, for repeated action. 3, viví. Viví is pretérito. This one is a specific completed action. It's over. A specific period of time was given that the person lived in Spain, and it's been completed. So that's why that one is pretérito. 4, hacía, which is imperfecto. It's for setting the scene of a story. 5, vio, pretérito. It's a specific completed action. Boom, the person saw something. And número seis, the correct answer is quería, which is imperfecto, because it's an emotional mental state. And that's a good one to always be watching out for. I think two of the biggies to watch out for with imperfecto are descriptions and emotional mental states. That will get you through a lot of them. Bien, feel free to go back and revisit these practices as you start to work on your own and do your tarea. And as always, just let me know if you have questions. Muchas gracias, amigos. Hasta luego.